IPO year overall. Give us some numbers, how we're ending up and how it compares to years past. Because I think the peaks were back in, what, 2020, 2021, back in the pandemic days.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And I would say 2025 was the first true reopening of the IPO window in several years, but it was a selective one. Year to date, we've seen about 75 IPOs, including the one you were just talking about. That sounds good compared to the 62, 35, and 28 IPOs that we've seen in 24, 23, and 22 respectively. But a good IPO year in the US is anywhere between 100 and 150 IPOs. So we're well behind that. But overall, 2025, we've been largely in line with expectations, and in some areas, it's exceeded them. We've seen activity spread across sectors rather than concentrated in just one area. That kind of dispersion is a strong sign and speaks to improving investor confidence. I would say the performance has been differentiated. Higher quality companies like the one you're just talking about with strong fundamentals, solid revenue growth, path to profitable or a path to profitability, reasonable leverage, and a compelling long-term story have generally performed well in this market. On the flip side, IPOs with higher debt loads, more aggressive pricing, they've struggled in this market, especially in a volatile macro environment. So that outcome has not been surprising, but it reinforced how selective investors are right now.
Okay, Mike, everyone just wants to talk about, with regard to 2026, SpaceX, and what that IPO could look like if the company decides to go public next year. Does that make or break 2026?
Well, look, I think when you look at the IPO pipeline for 2026, we see over 200 potential issuers in line that could go public in 2026. The SEC shutdown that took place in October, November pushed a lot of companies that may have had the opportunity to issue in 25 into 26. So number one, I think there's a deep pipeline of quality companies that are looking to go in addition to some of the big names out there.
For example?
I think we read them all in the headlines. Some of the hyperscalers that are out there supporting the strong markets. In addition to those, there's a lot of PE-backed companies that, the one today, they got a lot of attention. They priced well. They're trading well, as you noted. And I think that the backlog of PE-backed companies, sponsor-backed companies in the market is as stronger than ever. They have been a quieter part of the IPO cohort for the last couple of years. So I think 2026 is ripe for strong sponsor-backed companies that have been creating value in the background through M&A, through scaling, et cetera. So I think we'll have a very active IPO market in 2026.
Mike, if we look at performance of IPOs in 2025, it was really mixed. And overall, people think that AI names or crypto names have the biggest kind of, the best case for success. For 2026, what kinds of sectors you think would benefit, where you see the biggest potential? If we set aside some fundamentals or leverage, like where do you think investors should focus on?
I think it's going to be pretty wide sector representation in 2026. You mentioned AI. I think that entire ecosystem, despite the last few weeks or a month where there's been some pressure against it, there's a deep pipeline of strong companies in that area, from a data center, from a fiber perspective, and then just broader, the energy ecosystem that's required to power the data centers, and we need to catch up in that area. I think that's going to be very active as we look to 2026. Insurance was an active asset in 2025. Dependable cash flows, which investors like in a volatile market. We'll continue to see strong performing cash generating companies like an insurance company go well. And then I think other areas, you mentioned crypto, fintech, with the rise of digital assets and some healthy regulation, in the tailwinds in that sector, we expect that to continue to move forward a lot. So again, I think it's going to be a broad sector representation, which to me represents a really strong IPO market.
All right, so strong IPO market maybe to come in 2026. I looked at the IPO index, and I think it was up 5, 6, 7%. I mean, it's definitely underperforming the broader market. I mean, we had dismal debuts of StubHub, Navin, Gemini Space Station, and so they have all contributed to IPOs underperforming as an asset class, certainly compared to something like the S&P 500. It kind of sits with the notion that companies that go public are supposed to have cheaper valuations than their listed peers. Getting pricing, Mike, will be key in 2026?
I'm with you. When you look at the cohort of 2025, about 50% of the IPOs priced at the top end or above the range that was initially set. So some pretty aggressive pricing there. I think many of the companies that have struggled in 2025 are companies with, debt that's, above 4 times EBITDA leverage, which is tough in a dynamic environment when there is uncertainty still in the marketplace. So I do think companies that are going out in 26 have to be conservative on valuations. They have to look at their debt loads going in. And some of those key metrics that I mentioned earlier around revenue growth, customer growth, some of those key metrics that really show a powerful return will be important. When you look at, again, the cohort of 2025, 65% of the companies that went out had positive cash flows. That's a stark difference than when you back up over the last 5 years. So the quality is definitely being raised.
Hey, Mike, 10 seconds. SpaceX going to happen in the first half of the year. Do we even know? Have we heard anything? Do you hear anything? Go quickly.
I see the same things you see in the headlines. I think 26 will continue to be an exciting year, and hopefully we'll see some really big names go.